You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am really excited to have Faye Kellerman on the show with me today. She has an amazing new book. It's called The Lost Boys, and this is the 26th book in the Decker Lazarus series. And I'll tell you what, as a longtime lover of thrillers and crime fiction, this series has been a mainstay throughout my reading life, and I'm so happy to see that these characters are still going strong 26 books in, and happy to see that you're still doing so well with it. Welcome to the show, Faye.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Faye, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, I was a storyteller from way back. Since I was a little girl, I used to make up stories. Everything I'd see, or even before I could read, if I saw a movie, I would pretend I was that character. I had a small house that had a small backyard, but it also had a little small front yard that was covered with shrubbery. And I used to be behind the bushes making up my own stories. So much so that when my grandmother came out from the Midwest into California, the land of fruits and nuts, she said to my mother, "Is this child normal?" And my mother, God bless her, said, "Leave her alone. She's just playing with her stories." So those stories took a long time to percolate and actually come into books, but it was something that I used to do. I used to make up stories. I used to make up songs. Whatever I felt like doing, I had a very, very vivid imagination.
I love that. I think I've heard you tell that story before about your grandmother and wondering, if you were okay or not. And thank God that your mother took up for you. And do you think that your parents or your mother specifically or were there any other adults in your life that recognized this storytelling gene, if we get to call it that?
Honestly, I was the youngest of the kids, and I think my mother was just so happy that I was entertaining myself and out of her hair. She didn't want to upset the apple cart, so to speak. Like I said, I always had a very, very vivid imagination, but I was also a pretty good student. And nothing kills an imagination like formal education. I'm all for formal education. You need formal education. But when you're really busy studying in school, it just kind of blanks out everything. You
right.
Can't do anything except doing that, especially me. I was a math major, believe it or not. And then I went on to dental school. But I really didn't think of myself as having any opportunity to be a writer until I met Jonathan Kellerman, and things clicked.
That's, of course, a path through dental school is how all great thriller writers get their start. Everyone knows that.
You learn a lot about surgery. And I'll tell you what else dental school is very good for. When you go to the dentist, and anybody can relate to this, you don't want a dentist who's all of a sudden start looking for his tools while your mouth is wide open and you're in this uncomfortable position. So dental school, I was an organized person to begin with. Dental school taught me meticulousness and how to be organized before you even start the procedure. Other than that, not much overlap.
Well, other than what you just mentioned about your protagonist needing to be organized and dental school reinforced that, do you feel like you picked up any tools that you as a writer use, not just things that your characters use, but were there things that you as a writer picked up from your formal education?
It thinking and learning takes time. You don't rush things. Sometimes if it doesn't come to you today, it'll come to you tomorrow. And of course, practice makes perfect. Whenever you sit down to write, I'm sure many, many writers have told you that, we always kind of start with what we wrote the day before and start editing that. And that gets our minds thinking about moving forward. If you don't go back, your story's a little bit less continuous. It's a little less smooth. So we always kind of go back to where we were last the day before and clean that up a little bit. It not only provides continuity, but the stuff that you think is brilliant in first draft needs a lot of work. Nothing I've ever read can be improved with some judicious editing.
Sure. Faye, did you go into dental practice?
Actually, I didn't, because I was 6 months pregnant with my son, who's now 42. When I graduated, I fully intended to go back to dentistry. You don't go to dental school for self-actualization. I always say that. It's not the type of career that you go to learn things. It's the type of career you go to for a specific outcome.
Right.
And I was going to go back, and that's actually when I started making up stories again, because when you're with a baby, there's a lot of downtime. So this was the first time in like 25 years, I graduated at 26, that I really didn't have to stuff my brain with formal education, with things and facts that I had to give back to tests, or things or facts that I had to know in order to, work on a patient. And my mind was suddenly clear. So this time I had all these thoughts and all these fun stuff, and I started making up what ifs, but I had no idea what to do with it. It was just like daydreaming to me until I saw Jonathan, who had worked many years as a psychologist before he became a full-time writer. And I saw what Jonathan was doing. He was making up stories and putting them on paper. So I thought, okay, I'm making up stories. I'll put them on paper, and I can call myself a writer instead of a daydreamer, which sounds a lot better. And that's exactly what I did. And it was a long road from just starting to write to actually realizing a fully formed fictional novel. But you have to start somewhere, and that's what happened.
Do you remember that first idea that came to you that, when you started working on fiction again and allowing yourself to tell stories to yourself? Do you remember what that first idea was?
I don't remember what the first idea is, but of course, The Ritual Bath, which was my first novel, was not my first novel in my head, and in actuality, it was my first published novel. And when you're working with your first published novel, you have no idea that it's your first published novel. So you kind of throw in whatever you think might attract some readers and have interest to some readers. My first actual novel that never got published, thank God, was kind of a coming of age story. And it never went anywhere, but I liked the characters very much. So what I did is, once I got it into my series, they were teenage characters. Of course, at that time when I was starting to write, I was in my early 20s, and, I wasn't that far away from my teen years. So everybody starts with a coming of age story. It's a mistake. You have to grow up from there. So I started writing that, and the story was not the story that I could go out with, but the characters were very good. So when I wrote about teenagers in justice, I knew what I wanted to do in that novel, and I knew I wanted to explore teenagers. And I said, I don't have to invent them. I have them over there. I'll just cannibalize it out of this novel that never went anywhere and stick them into a new environment. And that's what I did.
Love it. You have one of the longest running series that I can name off the top of my head, and you've got these great characters that you have we have a relationship, as readers to these characters because we look forward to them coming out every year or so. As a writer, tell me a little bit about the relationship, if we can use that sort of language, with Peter Decker and Raina Lazarus. It's kind of an unfair question to say, when you first started writing them, did you know that it would turn into what it is now? Because rarely do we have that sort of insight in the beginning. But did you know there was something special about these characters and their relationship to each other?
I knew that these were good characters to come out with in a first novel, and I knew that they had life beyond a first novel. Other than that, not too much. The reason why I knew they were good characters is because Rena came from the heart. She came from a place that I know very well, and Decker was well thought out as well. And when I threw the two of them together, as I said, when you're writing a first novel, you don't know it's a first novel. So I threw them together, and then all of a sudden I had a single man and a single woman. I said, well, let's see what happens. And as you say, 26 books later, they're still alive and well. It's interesting that you use the word relationship with your characters, because you really do. They do talk to you.
Sure.
They talk to you in your head, and they are very much alive to you in your head. And when they are written down on paper, and if you don't have a relationship with your characters, I don't think they're fully fleshed out. They have to be your friends.
Absolutely. And I think, when we're talking about books and writing, this is one of the few places where it's safe to talk about these imaginary characters talking to you. It's
right.
It's really funny how they really do take on lives of their own.
And they lead you to different places. You might think they're going to react this way, and then all of a sudden they react totally different. And you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. You do control them, but you don't control them. Your subconscious has a lot of interplay with them. And they do, as I said, they do talk to you, but they do more than talk to you. They're like little tape recorders in your head when you're writing dialogue. And then all of a sudden you write some dialogue and you read it again, and you hear Peter saying, I would never say that. Yeah, erase that. And okay, erase it. You're right. You don't talk that way. And these characters have evolved. They have become, I won't say different people, but more mature people. To keep a series fresh, you can't change your characters drastically. But what you can do with any kind of character is you can throw them into novel situations and see how they react. And in that way, all sorts of different attributes and traits come out that you didn't know they had.
Right. And it's an interesting thing because, when we see a character on the page that we like or that we can connect with, there has to be something unique about them to make them stand out from the crowd, but they also need to be, close enough to us that we can relate to them. What are some of the ways that these two characters are relatable to you?
They relate because I think they're fully fleshed out human beings. They have good points, they have bad points, they stumble, they fall, they love, they get angry. They run the gamut of emotions, and it has to be that way. Peter and Rena are, I think, especially interesting because they have had a long-term marriage in addition to having in this long-term series, and their marriage has not gone stale. They work at it, and I think people who are in relationships can relate to the ups and downs, if anything, long term. They're just great. They are people who might be your next door neighbors. There's people who might be a friend. There's certainly good people. And that is fun to write about because when you're writing crime fiction novels, oftentimes there's a villain who's not so perfect. And it's always fun to compare and contrast them against other lives out there.
I've often wondered, Faye, when you have a writer like you that has written such a vast body of crime fiction, most of the time when you meet them, there's the sweetest, kindest people that you would ever meet, yet they can envision such, such tales of viciousness and come the darker side of our human nature. And why do you think it is that as readers, we love these types of stories? Is it because we get to experience them in the safety of our home and our reading chair, and kind of deal with the darker side of life without actually having to go through it? Or what do you think?
I think that that's definitely a factor in it. And you're right. Thriller novels, mystery writers, especially the more intense and darker they are, tend to be very, very sweet. I found so many helpful people along the way, starting with, the late Sue Grafton and Harlan Coben and Lee Child. They're all very nice people. I find when I write about things that concern me or scare me, it's a cathartic experience. I think readers feel the same way. Exactly what you say. They can read about it from the safety of their chair, or they can explore things that they can't really explore by just reading a book or reading a paper. We can really get down to the nitty-gritty and the nuances of a character and of a dark character and of a dark crime in a way that even movies can't do it, because movies cannot do internal thoughts, which is why my novels are hard to make into any sort of thing on a screen, because so much of what happens in my novels are characters thinking and analyzing, and you just really can't convey that on a screen to go inside a person's head. So I think we're all very curious. The human nature makes us so that we're curious about other people. And we as writers get this wonderful opportunity to explore it and to present it to our readers, who are wonderful, in an entertaining manner. You don't want to make it like a psych book. You want to make it entertaining. And that's always my goal, to write something interesting, but to take you away for a couple of hours.
Sure. There's one thing about a long running series. A lot of times the setting almost becomes a character in the book, and a couple of examples jump off. Harry Bosch, of course, is going to be in Los Angeles. Walt Longmire is going to be in Montana. There's going to the American West, it becomes a character in those books. You did something a few books ago, and you moved this series from LA, which it had very much been grounded in, to upstate New York. How did that? How did you address that? And do you think changing the setting, the location where your stories take place, did that open new doors and opportunities? And how did that affect you as the writer?
Very good question. First of all, when you write series characters, you kind of have a choice. How do you age them? Because obviously they're not quite aged in real time. Some people, like Sue Grafton, wrote them all within a certain period of time, so her character never got older. The Kinsey Millhomes, same as Agatha Christie's, their characters were pretty static in a certain time.
Sure.
For whatever reason it was, I chose to age my characters. probably because as they went along through life, as I went along through life, they went along through life. I had children, they had children. My children grew up to be teenagers, they dealt with teenagers. They fled the coop, my kids fled the coop. Now they moved to upstate New York, and it's just the two of us kind of in an empty nest. Why did I do it? Decker was getting a little older. He had a very good position in LA. He was all the way up to, a lieutenant. But he came to a conclusion in his life that he wanted something quieter. Of course, he didn't get it, but he wanted something quieter. They wanted to move closer to their children who are all back east. And as I said before, I couldn't really change him in Los Angeles because he was kind of set in a way. So I said, okay, let me drop them in upstate New York and see what happens when he's in this nice, quiet life. And my reason behind that is small towns usually stay, quiet. They have their vandalism and they have their drunk calls and they have their breaking and entering and they have very light crime. But what happens when a really serious crime takes place there, a real serious homicide that is going to demand serious detection? They're able to do it, but Peter's there. He's an old homicide cop. He's going to take the lead. So I liked bringing him there. It was a new environment. Plus, I could inject a little bit of youth into the series. His new partner was a 24-year-old law student named Tyler McAdams, who had joined the police force just to make his father mad because his father wanted him to become a lawyer. So he's still in Harvard Law School, and he's a little snot, and how he changes throughout the whole book, how he learns to adjust to a real world when he's been in this privileged academic setting for so long, how he changes from being a snot who doesn't know anything to being a real life police detective. So that was fun. And that's why I decided to move it. Rena wanted a quieter life, and she didn't get it either, but we'll see what happens to them in the future.
You say that Peter and Rena, wanted a quieter life, and of course they don't get it. And that's why we keep coming back book after book, is because we love to see how you torture Peter and Rena book after book. And what does that say about us as readers, that we love to see these people that we love so much, tortured and go through all the gamut of emotions? I don't know, but this is a safe place to do that.
You love your family members, and once in a while they go through hard times, and sometimes it's well-deserved that they go through hard times. You're always there to kind of pick them up and reassure them that it'll get better. We're all kind of interested. If you just wrote a book about being nice all the time, it's not interesting. You have to put people through their steps, through their trials, in order to bring out the character in them.
Absolutely. So, book 26, The Lost Boys. Where does this book find us? What's going on when we open in the beginning of the book?
Page 1, they're looking for a lost man. He's developmentally delayed. They're very, very worried. He was on a field trip with his residential home, and he disappeared and in woodland areas at night, which is very, very scary. So they're scouring the area for him, both in the small town of Greenbury and in the forest and in the woods beyond. I wanted to do something about missing persons. Most missing persons cases end happily, but what happens when it doesn't? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but what happens when missing persons go from being a day to a week to a month to a year? What kind of toll does this take on the family, the survivors, the people in the police force who are looking for them? The long-term effects of not knowing. This was something I wanted to explore.
Faye, yeah, a lot of times there will be real life issues that bleed over into thrillers, and it's fun to explore how things might have turned out, or how we might tackle a certain subject. Was there a real life situation that made you think of this storyline?
I had the answer is I wanted to explore this situation. There was never a real life that was totally comparable, but as I was writing and I was thinking of how this would be effective and how this would be affect people, I had this story when my kid was about 7 or 8. Jesse, like I said, he's 41 right now, so you can tell how far off this was. And I wrote about it for Barnes and Noble. I took him. He had a soccer game. He was 8 years old. He played soccer, and his team was on the field. And I said, Jesse, you stay here. You play your game. I'll be back way before the game ends. I have to run an errand. So I ran some stupid errand. I don't even remember. Came back. It was well before the game should have ended, but the field was empty. I'll get back to that in a minute. So all of a sudden, where's my kid? So I don't panic. I start looking around, but there's no one there. Then I start calling people. Have you seen Jesse? Did he go? I figured something must have happened and he went home with somebody. I called his friends, and then I finally got the number of the coach. I called the coach. I said, what happened? Oh, first of all, do you have Jesse? Because with each subsequent phone call where I was unsuccessful finding my son, I started getting panicky and panicky and panicky. So I finally called the coach, and he said, well, the team didn't have enough people. They were forfeited. Everybody went home. I said, so where's my son? I said, surely you didn't leave him alone there. He's an 8-year-old kid. And he did. So I was furious, but that wasn't my main concern at the point. So my babysitter, I had 2 younger kids at home at the time. So my babysitter was about ready to go home. My husband was there. I said, honey, the babysitter has to leave. I can't find Jesse. He said, just wait at the park. I'll come meet you, and then you can go home. And that's what happened. And then he started looking for him, and then it was panic. We couldn't find him anywhere. It was the most frightening moment of my parental life. And this lasted for about an hour. I remember my husband rushing around, driving in a car, and a cop stopped him because he was speeding. And there was tears in my eye. I can't find my son. And he said, well, sir, just slow down. I won't give you a ticket that time. Didn't offer to help look for the kid. Just dismissed him on his way. So finally, I was back home at this point. John was scouring the area. He finally saw Jesse just sitting there on a grandstand watching a baseball game. This was a huge, huge, huge part. And you have to remember, this was the age before cell phones, before, there was any sort of, instant communication. This was back at pay phones, and I don't even think car phones were very much the thing back then. So finally he found Jesse, and Jesse was fine. He was waiting for people. But it was the most panic-stricken moment of, as I said, of my parental life. I don't think we even had illnesses of kids that compared to how horrified I was. So I kind of drew upon that emotion. And what happens when these horrified emotions keep going day after day after day, as I'm sure they do when you have a missing person? You don't know. And it just eats away at you and it erodes your life. And I wanted to talk to the survivors of what this is and what happened. So the book was as much about trying to find people as it was looking at the toll that this long-term absence makes on the survivors, how your loved ones react. Because as we know, in crimes, there's the victim and then all the other ancillary victims that live victims that are still very much part of the crime.
Faye, after publishing as many books as you have, and being in the business as long as you have, has your writing process changed over the years? Are there things that you do now that are due to your writing process refining, or is there technology that's available now that maybe there wasn't in the beginning that has changed your writing process?
When I first started writing, I wrote by hand in spiral notebooks. Then I progressed to a typewriter, a Selectric. Then I remember getting a first word processing program. It was called Einstein Writer, and it was on floppy disk. I had a double floppy disk computer. I still have it. I kept it. So you can see how far back it goes. The process maybe has been made a little easier by all this newer technology. It certainly has, but it doesn't make you write any better, and it doesn't make you think any better. That's still a basic thing that you have to work out. What I find with technology is you write faster, but maybe not necessarily better. But you can edit and you can be merciless, and that's a very, very good thing. Speaking of technology, what I find interesting in my books, since my first novel came out in '86, before, like I said, before cell phones, before computers, before DNA, is the methodology that has switched on how to solve crimes. Because now you can track people with phone towers. There's DNA, which solves like 80% of the cold cases, 90% of the cold cases.
Right.
And how that has impacted on the way Decker solves the crime. And it has. But the actual process of going through the crime and the human element has not changed.
I love it. The new book is called The Lost Boys. When you're hearing this, it's available everywhere that you buy books, in Kindle edition, hardcover edition, or audiobook. Faye, what do you think about the audiobook editions of your books? You know, audio is the largest growth market in publishing right now. How have you seen that change?
It has changed a lot. Especially now, people are driving more. But I think the audio gives, it literally, not I think, it literally gives a voice to your characters. So it's kind of halfway in between that media, between seeing them on the screen and actually reading them and hearing it totally in your head. But when you do unabridged editions, they do abridged and unabridged editions, you still get the internal thoughts. So it's great, and it doesn't surprise me that it is on a high growth chart.
Right. Well, The Lost Boys is available everywhere now. Go grab your copy. We'll put links to it in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for people to grab. Faye, if people are just learning about you, God forbid, and want to dig into all the amazing stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
My books are in print and online everywhere. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, you name it, they're there. Feel free to download it. Feel free to come in the middle of the series. If the Lost Boy really piques your interest, you can go back to the beginning to the ritual bath, and there's 25 books waiting for you. My fans are the greatest. I love them, and I just hope I can keep entertaining them for many, many years to come.
Absolutely. Faye, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. We're going to send everyone to pick up a copy of the new book and to dig into your amazing back catalog. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hank. It's been my pleasure.
Both Barrels Publishing is the brainchild of successful indie author James P. Sumner. He has self-published over 15 titles in the last 5 years and has over 800,000 downloads so far in his career, meaning he has a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with the indie publishing community. Knowing the struggles of the modern-day indie author as well as he does, he wanted to create a platform that would allow writers of any level to learn the ropes, navigate the pitfalls, and produce a professional novel without wasting time or money in the process. Both Barrels Publishing is the perfect one-stop shop for any indie author, combining James's expertise with his own team of editors and designers so you can help your novel realize its full potential and learn how to publish yourself. The purpose of Both Barrels Publishing is to help indie authors get their novels ready for publication without all the stress, hassle, and unnecessary expense. We want to make your lives easier, which is why we're giving you access to a top-notch team to publish your novels, along with a generous discount on their services. You can also work one-on-one with James to learn the intricacies of self-publishing. No hidden cost, no false promises. We simply want you to publish the best version of your novel. BothBarrelsPublishing.com.